The planet glowed under a pale blue sun, its cities shining like tiny crystals from above. Among the bustling streets and towering buildings, a small figure slipped silently through the shadows. She was tiny, smaller than a human child. Yet her eyes carried a depth that made anyone who looked into them pause. Her skin shimmered faintly, like silver dust scattered across her arms, and her delicate limbs moved with a quiet grace. No one noticed her at first, not because she was unimportant, but because people were busy rushing through life. Ignoring anything that seemed different, the tiny alien girl wandered through the crowded streets, her small feet barely making a sound on the cold metal floor. She looked up at the towering humans and alien travelers, hoping for a smile, a gesture of kindness, anything to show she belonged. But all she received were curious glances that quickly turned away, whispers behind, hands, and the faintest sneers. The city was alive, but she felt invisible. Her stomach rumbled. She had not eaten in days, surviving on scraps she found hidden in quiet corners. Hunger gnawed at her, but it was nothing compared to the loneliness that settled around her like a heavy cloak. She ducked into an alley, pressing her tiny body against the wall, hoping no one would notice her fragile form. The shadows became her only friends, yet even they felt cold and distant. Above her, neon lights flickered, painting the alley in red and blue. She shivered, not just from the cold, but from a deep, lingering fear. In her own world, she had been taught that humans could be dangerous, unpredictable, and cruel. Every story she had ever heard whispered of strangers who hurt those who were small, weak, or different. Now, standing here alone, she wondered if those stories were true. A loud clang echoed from a nearby street, making her jump. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pressed herself tighter against the wall. Humans and aliens alike passed by, their eyes fixed forward, ignoring her entirely. She wanted to speak, to ask for help, but her voice was barely a whisper, swallowed by the noise of the city. Yet amid the indifference, she sensed something unusual. One human, a young man with gentle eyes and steady movements, seemed different. He did not look away when he passed her. He slowed his steps, as if studying her, not with fear or mockery, but with curiosity. Her tiny heart skipped a beat. Could this one human be different? Could he be someone who would see her, really see her, when no one else would? She watched him from the shadows. His gaze was soft but steady, not the quick glance of someone who dismisses what they don't understand. He paused, then took a few steps closer to her hiding place. The alien girl froze. Her mind raced. She wanted to run, to vanish into the labyrinth of alleys and shadows, yet a small part of her longed to stay. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was kind. The human crouched down, his hands open and empty, showing no threat. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm and gentle. The words were simple, yet they carried a warmth she had not felt in a long time. She tilted her head, unsure how to respond. Her instincts told her to flee, but her curiosity kept her rooted in place. Minutes passed like hours. The city continued its busy rhythm, ignoring both of them. The alien girl's small hands trembled as she slowly stepped forward, testing the human's patience. He did not move, did not rush her. He simply waited, letting her make the choice. Finally, she whispered, almost to herself, I have nowhere to go." The words were tiny, fragile, and honest. The human nodded gently, a small smile forming on his face. "Then you can stay here. If you want, you can sleep beside me tonight." The alien girl blinked, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. No one had ever said such words to her. No one had ever offered her safety. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of something she had almost forgotten, trust, as she stepped closer. The city around them faded into a blur of lights and noise. Here, In this quiet alley, a fragile bond was beginning. And though she did not yet know what the future held, for the first time she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was not entirely alone. The city continued its endless hum of lights, engines, and footsteps. But in the quiet alley, a fragile silence had settled. The tiny alien girl sat on the cold metal floor, her knees drawn to her chest, unsure if she should trust the human who had spoken to her. Her silver-flecked skin glimmered faintly under the flickering neon lights, and her wide eyes darted nervously at every shadow. The human crouched a few steps away, patient and calm, watching her with quiet care. He was not like the others. Didn't stare with fear or curiosity, and he certainly didn't laugh. Instead, there was something soft and steady in his gaze, as if he understood more than he let on. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread, holding it out gently. "You must be hungry," he said, voice low and kind. The alien girl froze. Food, kindness. No one had ever offered her either willingly. She looked at the bread, then at him, unsure if she could trust this stranger. But the hunger in her stomach gnawed at her, and slowly, cautiously, she inched forward. Her small hands reached for the bread, and the human did not flinch. Instead, he smiled softly, letting her take it as she nibbled quietly. He spoke again. "I'm called Kale," he said. "What's your name?" His tone was gentle, without pressure. The question hung in the air, simple but heavy with care. The alien girl hesitated. Names were personal, sacred, part of one's identity. Sharing hers would be an act of trust. Finally, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city. "I'm Lyra." Kale nodded, as if her name was a treasure he had been given. "Lyra," he repeated softly, letting the word linger. "It's a beautiful name." The alien girl's ears twitched at the compliment. No one had ever said her name like that, as if it mattered, as if she mattered. Minutes passed in silence, punctuated by the distant noise of the city. Lyra slowly relaxed, leaning slightly against the wall. Kale remained crouched nearby, a quiet guardian, neither crowding her space nor ignoring her presence. He began to tell small stories of the city, of its people, and of places where she could be safe. Nothing grand or heroic, just words that built a bridge of comfort and familiarity. But not everything was safe. Shadows moved at the edges of the alley, shapes of humans and creatures that glanced her way with suspicion or outright disdain. Lyra's body tensed each time someone passed, a silent reminder that the world outside this small space was still dangerous. Kale noticed immediately, his expression tightening with concern. "Ignore them," he whispered, more to reassure her than to command. "Here, you're safe with me." Lyra's eyes widened. Safe. She had almost forgotten the meaning of that word. Every encounter she had ever had with humans ended in fear, rejection, or avoidance. But Kale's presence, calm and unwavering, planted a seed of trust that grew slowly with each quiet moment. The night air was growing colder. Lyra shivered, her tiny frame trembling as the wind swept down the alley. Kale noticed and quickly removed his coat, draping it gently over her shoulders. She blinked up at him, stunned by the warmth not just of the coat, but of the gesture itself. It was simple, almost ordinary, yet it carried more meaning than words ever could. For the first time in days, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a possibility tiny, fragile hope that perhaps not all humans were indifferent or cruel. Perhaps there were some, like Kale, who could see beyond her size, her alien features, her difference, and recognize the being within. Hours passed. Lyra ate the rest of the bread quietly, and Kale remained close, talking softly, occasionally glancing toward the street to ensure no one approached. There was tension, yes, but it was accompanied by an unusual comfort, the feeling of being watched over, protected, and, strangely, understood. Finally, Cale stood and extended his hand toward her. "It's late," he said. "If you want, you can sleep beside me tonight. I promise you'll be safe." Lyra looked up at him, hesitation flickering in her silver eyes. Fear battled hope, instinct battled trust. Then, slowly, she nodded, taking his hand in that small alley. Among the shadows and flickering lights, an unlikely bond began. Not of words, not of grandeur, but of simple trust, kindness, and courage. And in that quiet beginning, Lyra realized that maybe, just maybe, she was not alone in the vast, cold universe after all. The first night was quiet. The city outside hummed with life, but inside the small alley, Lyra felt a fragile sense of safety. She sat beside Cale, wrapped in his coat, her tiny hands clutching it tightly. Every sound from the distant footsteps on the metal streets to the soft hum of the neon lights made her flinch. But Cale's presence beside her was steady and reassuring. "Are you cold?" Cale asked softly. He didn't wait for an answer. He simply adjusted the coat around her shoulders, letting his warmth flow through the fabric. Lyra stared at him, her silver eyes reflecting the dim glow of the lights. She wanted to speak, too. Say something, anything. But her voice seemed to have disappeared. Instead, she just nodded slightly, feeling a strange comfort she had almost forgotten existed. The city had taught her one lesson clearly: trust no one. Humans ignored her, avoided her, or worse, mocked her. And yet, here was Cale, a human, who did the exact opposite. He did not rush her, did not ask her questions she was not ready to answer. He simply stayed. He existed as a steady presence, letting her make her own choices, letting her decide when it was safe to open her heart. Hours passed slowly. Lyra's small body relaxed little by little. She even dared to let herself touch Cale's hand once, brushing it with her tiny fingers. The contact was electric in its simplicity. She felt a connection, a fragile thread weaving between them that said, "Maybe I'm not alone." Cale smiled gently, noticing the small gesture, but he did not comment. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Then came the first real test of trust. A shadow moved near the alley entrance. Lyra froze, her body stiff and tense, and Cale's gaze sharpened. The silhouette was human, but it carried no kindness. They looked at Lyra with curiosity that bordered on mockery there. Eyes narrow and suspicious. Her small frame trembled, and her instinct screamed at her to run, to vanish, to hide forever. Cale stepped in front of her, just slightly, not aggressively, but protectively. "Stay calm," he whispered, his voice steady, almost a shield against it. Her fear, Lyra's gaze locked on his, searching for a hint that she might be safe. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. Perhaps humans weren't all dangerous. Perhaps, just perhaps, one human could see her differently. The shadow lingered for a moment longer, then moved on. Lyra exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave her body. Cale placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "See? Nothing to fear," he said softly. She wanted to argue that fear was all around, but she couldn't. She had survived many days alone. Yet this human's calmness made her small fears seem manageable. Over the next few hours, Cale talked to her quietly, telling her stories of his childhood, of the small joys and struggles of life on this planet. Nothing dangerous, nothing threatening, just words to show her that the world could have moments of kindness. Lyra listened, her eyes bright with curiosity. She even dared to ask a question. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. Cale paused, thinking carefully before he answered. "Because no one deserves to be alone and afraid," he said simply. Even the smallest being can have a heart that matters. Even you, Lyra. His words sank deep into her, more profound than any gift or food he could have given her. It wasn't just kindness, it was recognition. He saw her. Really saw her. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the city, Lyra had taken another small step. She allowed herself to lean slightly against Cale, trusting that he would not let anything harm her. The city outside was loud, uncaring, and cold, but inside this small pocket of quiet, a fragile trust had formed. It was not complete. She would still flinch at sudden noises, still hesitate to speak her mind fully. But for the first time, Lyra felt that trust was possible. She realized that perhaps survival was not just about escaping danger, was about finding someone willing to care, willing to stand by you even when the world refuses. And in that fragile, tentative bond, Cale and Lyra found the first spark of something that could grow, a connection that promised that maybe they could face the dangers of the city together. Night had fully fallen over the city, painting the streets with deep shadows and flickering neon lights. The cold air swept down the alley, carrying distant sounds of engines, footsteps, and the occasional laugh of strangers who did not notice the small drama unfolding in the quiet corner. Lyra shivered slightly, pulling Cale's coat closer around her tiny frame. She had survived many nights alone, hiding in alleys and under abandoned structures. But this night felt different. For the first time, she was not completely alone. Cale had set up a small space for her in his modest shelter, a quiet room tucked away in the lower level of an old building. He had cleared a corner with a few soft blankets and placed a small lantern that cast a gentle, warm light. "You can sleep here tonight," he said, his voice calm and soft. "I'll stay nearby. Nothing will harm you." Lyra hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, to hide, to avoid letting anyone get too close. Trust was dangerous. She had learned that the hard way. But there was something about Cale that felt different, steady, calm, patient. He wasn't rushing her, wasn't demanding anything. He simply offered her safety, and that small gesture carried more weight than any words. Slowly, she stepped forward, her tiny feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. Cale didn't move, didn't speak. He just let her decide how close she wanted to be. Lyra finally sank onto the blankets, wrapping herself in the warmth of the coats he had placed there. The lantern light flickered softly over her shimmering skin, casting shadows that made her look even smaller, more fragile. Cale sat a short distance away, keeping watch, but making sure not to crowd her space. "It's okay," he whispered. When he noticed her tense posture, "You're safe now." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight of reassurance that she had not felt in a long time. Her ears twitched, her silver eyes blinking as she stared at him silently. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words were stuck in her throat. Outside the small room, distant noises echoed, a metallic clang, the hum of engines, the occasional shout. Lyra flinched at each sound, her body curling tighter under the blankets. Cale noticed immediately. Without hesitation, he moved a little closer, gently draping another layer of blanket over her shoulders. "Nothing out there can touch you here," he said quietly. "I won't let anything happen to you." For a long time, the only sounds were the soft hum of the lantern and the occasional rustle as Lyra shifted under the blanket. Slowly, the tension in her body began to ease. She dared to peek up at Cale, seeing the quiet determination in his eyes. He was not just keeping her safe. Peace, he was showing her that someone could care without expecting anything in return. That was a new experience. For her, one that felt fragile yet precious. Minutes turned into hours, and the night stretched on. Lyra allowed herself to relax a little more, inching closer to the blanket's edge where Cale sat. She could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, and for the first time in many nights, she felt a flicker of calmness. The fear that had always clung to her began to soften, replaced by a strange warmth she could not name as the city continued its restless night outside. Lyra realized something important. Survival wasn't just about hiding or running. It was about trust, about finding someone willing to stand by you when the world turned its back. Cale had given her that trust, and in return, she allowed herself to accept his care, even if only for a few hours. By the time the first pale light of dawn crept through the small window, Lyra had curled up on the blankets, feeling more secure than she had in days. Cale remained nearby, vigilant yet unobtrusive, letting her find comfort in his presence. Outside, the world remained indifferent, but inside that small room, a tiny alien girl discovered that maybe, just maybe, she could let someone in without fear. And so the first night together ended not with grand events or heroic battles, but with a quiet understanding. A fragile trust had been built, a connection that promised safety, warmth, and the faintest glimmer of hope in a world that had, so far, ignored her. Morning came slowly, spilling soft golden light into the quiet room. Lyra stirred under the blankets, blinking her silver eyes at the unfamiliar brightness. For a moment, she hesitated, half expecting the cold, indifferent city to rush in and remind her she didn't belong. But Cale was still there, sitting quietly nearby, sipping a small cup of warm liquid he called tea. His presence had become a comfort she didn't fully understand yet, a steady anchor in a world that had always been chaotic. "Good morning," Cale said gently, smiling without any expectation. "Did you sleep well?" Lyra tilted her head, unsure how to answer. Sleep was a foreign concept for her. Nights had always been filled with hiding, fear, and hunger. But this night had been different. For the first time, she had felt safe. "Yes, I think so," she whispered, her tiny voice almost lost in the quiet of the room. Cale nodded, his eyes softening. "We should get something to eat," he said. "I'll show you a safe place nearby." His words were simple, yet they carried promised safety, care, and an offer to explore the world without immediate fear as they stepped out into the streets. Lyra kept close, her small hand brushing Cale's, as if to remind herself that someone could be trusted. The city was alive, bustling with humans, aliens, and machines moving in all directions. Some glanced at her briefly, curiosity flashing in their eyes, but most ignored her entirely. She had grown accustomed to invisibility, yet with Cale by her side, she felt noticed in a way she had never known. Cale led her to a small market street where vendors sold food, tools, and strange gadgets from distant planets. "Pick anything you like," he said with a kind smile. Lyra's eyes widened at the colorful displays. Her small stomach growled at the smells, yet she hesitated. She had learned that taking what she wanted often led to trouble. "Here," Cale said, gently nudging a piece of bread toward her. "You can eat this without worry." She accepted it slowly, tasting it for the first time in days. Warmth spread through her tiny body, not just from the food, but from the realization that someone cared enough to offer it freely as they walked. Cale spoke softly about the city, the people, and the ways he navigated the streets safely. Lyra listened, absorbing every word. Her small mind was curious, eager to learn, yet cautious. She asked questions hesitantly, and Cale answered patiently, never rushing her, never dismissing her thoughts. The more time she spent with him, the more Lyra noticed little things. The way he watched out for her when a cart passed too close. The way he laughed gently at her small, nervous gestures, and the way he always made space for her to move safely. Trust was no longer a concept she only remembered from stories. It was becoming real debt. Even as her trust grew, danger still lingered. From the edges of the streets, a few humans whispered and stared, their expressions skeptical, or mocking. Lyra flinched at each glance, but Cale stayed close, giving her silent reassurance. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "We only need to focus on today, on now." His words were a shield against the city's indifference, and slowly she began to believe them. By midday, they found a quiet spot near a small fountain where water trickled gently over smooth stones. Lyra perched on the edge, dipping her fingers into the cool water. And for the first time in a long while, she laughed softly. Cale's eyes lit up at the sound. It was tiny, fragile, but it was hers, and it was real. "See," Cale said with a grin, "even in a world that doesn't notice, there are moments like this, moments we can hold on to." Lyra looked up at him, her heart fluttering. For the first time, she felt a small spark of belonging. The day passed with small adventures, learning to navigate streets safely, sharing food, and discovering tiny joys she had never experienced before. By evening, the bond between them had grown stronger, delicate, yet unbreakable. Lyra realized that Cale was more than just a protector. He was becoming her friend, her guide, and the first human who truly cared for her as the sun dipped behind the tall city buildings, painting the sky in pink and orange. Lyra knew one thing. For the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone. And in a world that had ignored her, one human had shown her that trust, care, and friendship could exist even in the smallest, most unexpected places. The city lights glimmered as evening fell, casting long shadows across the streets. Lyra clung to Cale's side, her tiny fingers brushing against his hand for reassurance. Today had been full of small victories. She had eaten properly, laughed softly, and even dared to walk alongside Cale without fear. Yet beneath the warmth of the day, a sense of unease lingered. Lyra could feel it in the air, the subtle tension that whispered danger even when nothing seemed visible. Cale noticed her unease immediately. "Stay close," he whispered, his eyes scanning the street. "I feel something off." He didn't explain, because words could sometimes heighten fear rather than calm it. Instead, he adjusted his grip on her small hand, guiding her through the winding alleys where shadows pooled and whispers drifted. A sudden clatter echoed from the street ahead. Lyra froze, her heart pounding. Something or someone was moving fast. Cale crouched slightly, shielding her with his body, and whispered, "We need to be careful." She nodded, her small body tense, ready to run, but trusting him to lead. From the shadows, two figures emerged. They were humans, but their expressions were hard, their eyes sharp with suspicion and something darker hostility. They glanced at Lyra with thinly veiled disdain, whispering to each other. Lyra shrank back instinctively, her instincts screaming that these humans would not offer kindness. Cale stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Back off," he said. The words carried authority, not anger. The two humans hesitated, but one of them sneered. "What's this? Some alien freak hiding with a human?" He spat, advancing a step. Lyra's silver eyes widened with fear. She pressed herself closer to Cale, trembling, wishing the ground would open and swallow her whole. Cale didn't flinch. "She's not your concern," he said quietly, his tone sharp enough to warn, but not provoke unnecessarily. The two humans exchanged a glance, then backed away reluctantly. Lyra exhaled slowly, her body relaxing just a fraction. The danger had passed, but the tension remained. A reminder that not everyone would accept her presence. They continued through the alleys, and Cale led her to a quieter street, one less crowded, one where the lights flickered dimly and shadows provided cover. He glanced at her, eyes soft. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe as long as we stick together." Lyra nodded, clinging to his words, clinging to him. but the city was full of unseen eyes. Lyra noticed small things, now the way a shadow lingered too long on a wall, the faint hum of a surveillance drone overhead, the distant shouts of someone being aggressive somewhere else. She realized that safety was temporary, fragile, and required vigilance. Cale seemed to sense her growing anxiety. He crouched to her level, gently brushing a strand of shimmering hair from her face. "You've been brave today," he said softly, "and tomorrow we'll be braver. But for now, we need to keep moving, stay aware, and trust that we can handle whatever comes." Lyra's tiny chest rose and fell rapidly as she absorbed his words. Bravery, trust, safety, concepts she had only dreamed of. They walked slowly, blending with the shadows, avoiding busy streets and suspicious eyes. Every step was measured, every glance cautious. Lyra's fear was tempered by Cale's calm guidance. She realized something important. Survival wasn't just about hiding or fleeing. It was about using courage, wit, and trust to navigate a dangerous world. As the night deepened, they finally reached a small, secluded courtyard. The moonlight spilled over cracked stone walls, giving the area a ghostly glow. Cale let her sit for a moment, watching her carefully. "Rest here for a bit," he said, keeping his voice low. "We'll figure out the next move together." Lyra sank to the ground, her body trembling from adrenaline and fear. But beneath it all was a growing feeling of trust in Cale. Trust in their bond, and a tiny spark of confidence that maybe, just maybe, they could survive whatever danger came next. And though the city outside remained indifferent, full of threats and hidden eyes, Lyra knew one truth. She wasn't facing it alone. Cale was with her, and together they could face anything. But even in that quiet courtyard, the shadows hinted at challenges yet to come. The real test of trust, courage, and survival was only beginning. The moon hung high over the city, its pale light spilling across rooftops and empty streets. Lyra clung to Cale's side as they moved cautiously through the alleyways, her small frame trembling from the cold and exhaustion. The events of the past day weighed heavily on her tiny shoulders, the fear, the distrust, the moments of near danger, but she also felt something new. A quiet courage growing inside her like a fragile flame. Cale noticed her hesitation and slowed his steps. "We're almost there," he whispered. "Just a little farther. Trust me." Lyra's silver eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt. There was none. Only determination, steady and unwavering. The kind of determination that could protect and inspire even the smallest of beings. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the street ahead. Lyra froze, her instincts screaming at her to run, to hide, to vanish. But Cale's hand tightened gently around hers. "We face it together," he said firmly. His calmness was infectious. Slowly, Lyra nodded, drawing in a shaky breath and following him forward. Around the corner, figures blocked their path, humans from earlier, but this time more aggressive, more determined to cause trouble. Lyra's heart pounded, and she instinctively shrank behind Cale. But Cale didn't flinch. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the threat. "Leave her alone," he said, voice strong. "She's under my protection." The taller of the two sneered and raised his hand as if to strike. Cale moved faster than Lyra could comprehend, grabbing a nearby pipe and holding it defensively. "I warned you," he said. The tension was thick, every second stretching like an eternity. Lyra's small body trembled, but she didn't run. She realized something in that moment. Cale wasn't just protecting her, he was showing her the meaning of courage. One of the aggressors lunged, and Cale deflected him, creating just enough space for Lyra to slip behind a stack of crates. Her small hands gripped the edges as she peered out, watching Cale's calculated movements. She felt an unfamiliar surge of confidence. She wasn't entirely helpless. She could do something. She had to. Remembering the lessons Kale had silently taught her how to stay calm, how to move quietly, Lyra darted from her hiding spot. She tripped, stumbled, but managed to knock over a small container, sending a loud crash that startled the aggressors. In that brief distraction, Kale seized the opportunity, guiding Lyra forward. Together, they ran, ducking into narrow alleyways where the humans could not follow. Breathless, they finally reached a quiet courtyard, safe for the moment. Lyra sank to the ground, shaking, but Kale crouched beside her, his hand on her small shoulder. "See," he said softly. "We faced it together." Lyra looked up at him, eyes wide with awe and gratitude. She realized then that trust was more than words. It was action, courage, and the willingness to stand by someone when the world turns its back. Kale had given her trust, safety, and guidance. And in return, she had found her own courage. The city outside remained indifferent, full of dangers and challenges, but Lyra no longer felt powerless. She had Kale, and together they were stronger than any threat. The night was not completely safe, but it was manageable, filled with hope rather than despair as dawn approached. Painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, Lyra allowed herself to rest against Kale. Her small body relaxed, her heart lighter than it had been in days. She had survived, not just because of instinct, but because of trust and courage. She had learned that even the tiniest being could inspire bravery. And even the seemingly ordinary human could be a hero. Kale smiled, watching her drift into a light, peaceful sleep. "You're stronger than you think, Lyra," he whispered. "And together, there's nothing we cannot face." For the first time, Lyra felt truly safe, truly seen. The world might continue to ignore her, might continue to judge and fear what it did not understand, but in Kale's presence, she discovered the power of human compassion, the strength of courage, and the beauty of trust. And in that quiet moment, beneath the awakening light of a new day, a tiny alien girl and a human found a bond unbroken by fear. A bond that promised that no matter what came next, they would face it together, brave, unafraid, and united.